You can smell it, you can taste it. When you speak to the producer, you say, where do you source from? And when you scale back to where it actually comes from, it's like anything. You taste good quality. You can taste it, the sweetness, the smell, the texture. People aren't stupid now. I think the customer, they know good quality. They see it.
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Our perception of quality in a hospitality sense has changed a lot over the years. Traditionally, fine dining was always spoken of as quality, and cafes and casual dining restaurants were generally not. But everyday eating has changed a lot after a throng of operators leapt into the market and helped elevate it. For Robert Lechowicz, leaving a career in finer dining and raising the stakes in the cafe culture has been life-altering, not just for him, but for his customers too. Robert, how are you?
Very well, yourself?
I'm good. You had a world in fine dining for quite a while, and now you're one of the leaders in the cafe sector. What was that transition like for you?
In the beginning, it was a little bit tough, to be honest, just because all I knew was fine dining, both here in Australia and overseas. But it was something that I wanted to do. I was quite, passionate about creating a more relaxed environment that people could still have the same style of food, quality food. So it was difficult, but it was more so trying to find itself, because it wasn't very common at that stage when we were opening up. So yeah, it was a great transition, and I think it speaks volumes now.
The skills that you obtained in that sort of finer dining restaurant world, have you found them quite useful in this sense, trying to deliver that casual offering?
Oh, definitely. When we were opening up, the cafe scene was starting to evolve, and one thing we call it a cafe, but it's really that bridge between restaurant and cafe. And the way it's evolved now, and the quality that you get, it's two worlds.
Take us back to when you were young. I'd love to explore this fine dining sort of world that you lived in for a period of your career. But what was food like for you as a kid growing up?
So my family is of Polish heritage. So mum was a great cook. There's a funny story. My grandpa came from Poland after communism fell, and they were allowed to leave the country, and he stayed with us for a little while. And just watching him go to the markets and buy a whole pig and take it home and break it down and make all those smoked sausages and blood puddings, and smoking the sausages on a household barbecue outside over the chimney of the bricks, like stuff like that. When you're young, kind of resonates, and you kind of look at that and go, oh, like that's where sausages come from. Like that's because most people won't. It doesn't resonate with them. They'll think, oh, you're bacon or this product, and I think, where does that come from? So little things like that really ignited a little fire, I guess, for myself. And then it kind of evolved from there.
Do you have a story of that experience, like the first time maybe you saw him break down a pig or make the sausages or something like that?
Yeah, so the first time it happened, I was quite young, and I had to ask my mother this a few months ago. I was like, do you remember that story? She said, yeah. So basically they went to the markets, they got a pig and brought it back home and did what they had to do, break it down, the rest of it. And the neighbours were all kind of peeping over the fence, going like, what's going on? We got a few knocks on the door. They saw a man with a knife and blood everywhere. But it wasn't common at that stage. And I don't think people, going back to that, where does the food come from kind of a thing, that people don't realise that this is where it comes from and this is how it's prepared, and it's just the natural thing. Like, we've just forgotten that maybe over time.
You mentioned your Polish heritage. How important is the pig in Polish culture in regards to food?
It's pretty prominent. You get I'd say Polish food is kind of a mixture between Middle Eastern. It's got a little bit of German influences. So you've got your sauerkrauts and pork knuckles and that kind of stuff, and sausages. sausages were, I guess, a preservation method. Smoking and curing throughout winter. It's a lot of the Polish food comes from that kind of processing of being able to keep food throughout winter. Curing and salting and pickling, and that's where it really evolved from. So yeah, it is. The pork would definitely be a strong focus within Polish food and cuisine.
Take us back to when you were young and you first sort of stepped into the industry. What was the lure like to join the industry? And do you have any stories of what it was like cutting your teeth?
Yeah. I think I always knew I wanted to be a chef. When I kind of mentioned it to my mother, she's like, no, when you need to go to uni, that's what you do. It's just a very Polish thing to do, become an engineer or, someone within mathematics or, one of those fields. So I was a pretty good kid, still did quite well at school, and I got into uni for engineering, but I just said to my mom one day, this is what I want to do. And I remember she looked at me and she said, well, if you're going to do it, you need to be the best. So I guess that's where for me, as I stepped into the kitchen, I was always with this focus of I need to learn as much as I can so that one day I can be great and do great things and, really excel at this career for the rest of my life until I retire. So I remember stepping, into my first kitchen. One of my first major jobs, I'd say, kind of in a good restaurant would have been probably Bambini. It's still around today, Bambini Trust, yeah. And I remember on the first day, at the end of the day, I was like buggered, and I just thought to myself, oh, this is not like cooking at home. This is very different. But, it's one of those things you see a challenge and you want to overcome it and you get better at it. And as you get better, you feel better about yourself. So, yeah, I had a really good experience.
Were there any mentors in your younger years that sort of helped you create your own path in the industry?
I think every job that I had, whether it be the venue or the person, I took away bits and pieces I think I could help me throughout my career. In Australia, like Tony Bilson, you could see he was so passionate about food. So he would come in and it'd be constantly a discussion about some form of food, or he'd see something overseas in a magazine, or he'd do research or speak to a friend in France. And he was so passionate about it. It was not about the dollars. It was not about the business. It was such a passion for food, and everything else came second. And him and others as well, overseas, Jean-Luc Rocha, who I worked for in a 2-star in France, was my first job there in Pauillac in Bordeaux. He was a MOF. It's a MOF. It's like a competition they have in France, and he won that. And his technique was just flawless. Like, you could ask him anything on anything, and he would know it. And that pushed me a little bit. It's like, you need to learn as much as you can, and your techniques as well need to be flawless by the time you get to a stage where you have people underneath you that are looking up to you. Yeah.
Take us back to your time with Tony Bilson. He impacted so many of us over so many decades in different restaurants and in different ways, an incredible influence on the Australian culinary landscape. Do you have any stories of sort of the impact he had on you?
Yeah, like I remember, so I started there quite young. I believe that I was an apprentice when I started, or I just finished my apprenticeship and I actually finished off sous chef there, which was a huge achievement for me. And I think, with him and the chefs, head chefs at the time, they just pushed you. And, he would just come in with like 100 kilograms of truffles that he'd purchased and said, okay, we're going to get port and we're going to get brandy and we're going to boil it and then we're going to put it into jars and then we're going to sell this to the public. And it was like a ridiculous price where we're not making money. And I just, goes back to this thing of he was just so passionate about people learning and the customer being able to experience things that they normally wouldn't be able to experience. And I think that resonates with me now, especially with my venues. It's get the customer trying things that they normally wouldn't, because there is a whole other world out there of ingredients and produce.
Well, when did you start to think about that transition of taking your fine dining skills and pushing into the cafe area?
Over my career, so I did fine dining basically my whole career in Australia. And then when I went to France, it was an amazing experience. But the culture overseas, to be able to bring that back to Australia, I didn't think would work. at the time. In France and London, in the UK as well, where I worked, it's especially France. I'd say it is really a career that you end with. You start and you end and you retire. You can be a chef. There's hotels and palaces where you got brigades of still 30, 40 chefs working within one kitchen, and the goal is to create amazing food so that you can bring customers into the hotels more so. It's luring people in. It's, they're not focused on food costs and labor costs. It's more so the prestige, because they're making money off the hotels. It's to be able to bring that back here was, at the time, I thought, I don't want to work for someone the rest of my career. I want to be my own, my own boss. And how do I create an environment where I'm not going to work myself to the bone for nothing, but I can create something that's sustainable for years to come, and potentially open more venues, and being able to offer the customer still amazing produce and quality, but in a really non-pretentious and relaxed environment, which I think Aussies are. Like the brunch scene in Australia is amazing, and you can go and have cocktails, with your brunch and great produce still, but it's, you still feel relaxed and you can still talk with your friends, and you don't have to worry about not speaking too loudly. It's really not stiff. It's fun.
Tell us about the early days and creating the menu. Is it much different to sort of what it is now?
I think in the beginning we're a little bit safer, in the sense that, for me, I had to scale it back. I wanted to do all these things that were really relating to fine dining, but in a brunch scene, anyone that's in the industry within, cafes, restaurants would understand that brunch is fast paced, and you're doing not, 50 covers, you're going to be doing 400, 500 covers in a day. So the real challenge was being able to adapt that style of food to the actual setting of a brunch setting. So over, in the beginning, I think it was a little bit safer, and over the years, and even now, we're evolving and changing a little bit more. And, we started doing nights at our Bondi venue, which we opened, roughly 6 months ago. So we do, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, and it's a completely different menu. And I think it's a great setting for people when they come and work with us, because they're basically getting all services, breakfast, lunch and dinner, and all the dishes are different. You're getting such a vast variety of food. So definitely always evolving and changing. And I think you need to. I don't think you can stay stagnant. You can't expect to do the same thing for 15 years and it's still going to be popular. Like, times change, people change, and the world's evolving.
And tell us a bit about your approach with pork on the menu. Do you lean into your heritage? What's the approach that you take?
I think I would draw inspiration from everywhere, but definitely I draw a lot of inspiration from overseas. When I worked in France, that was where I think I really learnt the majority of my trade. And not only that, but the amount of dishes that I saw constantly, because it wasn't, I'd say at one particular venue, which was L'Abbé, which was a 2-star in Paris. I was a sous chef there, and your responsibility was not only to take care of the team, but also to come up with at least 2 new dishes a day. You're working 5 days, so that's 10 new dishes a week. And it wasn't, you put it up and it kind of worked out. It was, you need to get it perfect. So if we need to redo it 15 times, we were going to redo it 15 times until it's perfect. So, and this is what I mean about budgets, and there was no real percentages. It was more so about the food. So I'd say a lot of my inspiration would draw from that. But even today, like I'll see something, go to a relative's house and try something. You take bits and pieces. You're obviously not going to, I think in our venue, it was always to think outside the box and put a spin on things, and maybe add an extra ingredient or an element that people have never tried before. So I wouldn't say we're very traditional. I'd say we use a little bit more wacky or unknown ingredients to try and get people to try it. So inspiration drawn from everywhere, I'd say.
There aren't many brunch or breakfast menus in the country that don't have bacon on the menu. Tell us a bit about bacon and the program that you have there.
So the bacon we've actually been using for 7 years or 7.5 years. It's the same one from day dot. Lucas, so they're in Bronte, Lucas Meats. So, bacon is probably one of the biggest or mostly used ingredients that we have in our venue. We go through so much of it. And we actually did a tastings, when we first opened. And you can actually taste the quality. Like Lucas, obviously use Australian. They're local to us, especially in Bondi. And we've done some great dishes over the years. We actually did one last year for National Bacon Day. So we did like a little, it's like it was meant to be a fancy egg and bacon roll. So we used their bacon. We did like a toasted ciabatta. There was a sour cherry and pepperberry relish that we made, melted camembert and fried eggs with a truffle mayo. Yeah, so we actually saved some truffle from winter and we chopped them up and we made a mayonnaise with that. So yeah, it was pretty cool. But that's what I mean. Like we try and I think our job as chefs is to really use a good ingredient and cater to that and make the flavors stand out of that ingredient or showcase it the best we can.
What makes great bacon from your perspective?
You can just taste it. Like you can smell it. You can taste it. When you speak to the producer, you say, where do you source from? And when you scale back to where it actually comes from and you understand those people that actually, producing those products, it's like anything. You taste good quality. You can taste it, the sweetness, the smell, the texture. It's all there, the color, those kind of things. You can definitely, in my opinion, that goes with anything, vegetables as well. You can pick up a vegetable and that it's, if it's firm and it's got great color and you see those things. People aren't stupid now. I think the customer, they know good quality. They see it, and they're a lot smarter these days than they were in terms of being able to recognize that many years ago.
A little earlier, you mentioned your grandfather and the influence of him breaking down a pig and some of the things that he made. You spent a lot of your career in France. The pig is pretty vital to French cuisine as well. Are there any sort of dishes or techniques that you took from your time in France where the pig was sort of pivotal?
Yeah, I think the one that resonates with me the most would be hunting season in France. Especially with the wild boars and pigs that they would kind of hunt. You basically, so I remember in Bordeaux and in Paris, it was a very big season where the hunters would come in and say, look, we can provide you this, this, and this. Or they'd come in on the day and say, look, we've got, 4 boars, four wild pigs or whatever it was on the day. And you just select how many you want. And it was a method of breaking it down. Basically, you'd have to remove all the hair, everything, the skin, then break it down. And a really popular thing was to make terrines out of it, especially with the head and the trotters, where you braise it down. You pick off all the meat from the heads, all those little bits and pieces that normally get thrown away. You pick them out, and it's time consuming. You have 5 chefs there just picking out meat, and then you use, with foie gras and truffles, you'll make these terrines, and you're using the gelatin from the stock that you make from the bones and set the terrines with that. And it was just a labor of love. Like everyone will put up their hand to be able to do it. But it was just this surreal experience of you actually see everything from start to finish. And it resonated with me, just going back to that story of my grandfather.
You mentioned that your Bondi venue is now doing dinners a couple of nights a week, and the food is a little bit different at night. Tell us about how different the food is. Do you approach the menu differently with pork, for instance?
Yeah, so the menu is more so a sharing style menu. So you have smaller plates, mediums, and then to larges. And we have some beautiful, prosciuttos and we use a truffled, similar to like a salami from a producer in Australia as well, in Sydney, Pino's Meats. So we use, they're great guys. They're amazing people, and their factory and everything, if you've ever walked through it, is amazing. And they're really adaptive as well. We've asked in the past to be able to do up a few items, and they actually make poly sausages as well for a few customers. But yeah, you can kind of like just speak to the boys and say, I want to create this, and they've done it before in the past. So yeah, we use a few of their products for the small starters, and we just slice that fresh, and it's a beautiful dish on its own. And and then we constantly play around with things for the larger plates, and we'll definitely do some pork items, to share in the future. We're always creating.
I see one of my favourite dishes, the pork cotoletta, is features on the menu. Tell us how you approach that and what makes a great cotoletta.
Yeah, so we've done that cotoletta a few ways. We've done it in veal, and also we've trialled it in pork as well. So I think it goes back to the product, and just treating it with care. And that one there we do with tarragon and shaved pecorino and a few. We make our own fresh crumb and just cooking it fresh and then just slicing it. It's just an amazing product. There's some great products out there people need to start trying. I don't know if you've, in London when I was working, there's a product, Preza. It's basically from Iberico pigs, and everyone over there just treats it like a steak. You sear it, and it just basically, you can serve it still a little bit pink. I don't know if you know about obviously the Iberico pigs, they eat acorns, and they live a good life, and I think the product kind of, you can taste it through that.
You made a name for yourself with the Cronulla store, and as you mentioned, you opened Bondi more recently. What's changed for you in running two venues now? Do you treat them differently? Do they require a different menu for a different audience?
So change for me is definitely, and I think this is for any chef that becomes an owner, it's a very different mindset that you have to have. You can't completely have tunnel vision in what you do. You are an owner, and I think people depend on you. You need to really step back and look for things from outside the box. You can't be stuck on one little task. So what my role really is to monitor the business and menu creation, and getting the other staff involved as well to be able to do that. But in terms of the two venues, the daytime menu is quite similar, I'd say. There's a few variances which we try and create unique dishes for the specific venue, so customers feel as though it's their own. And whenever we do open up a venue, and we'll continue to open up the venues within areas, we want those customers to feel as though that venue is theirs. It's not these guys are opening up from this area. It's, we're opening here. These dishes are few. We listen to what you want as a customer within the area, and we'll create those items around that. So we're very adaptive. It's not like we need to keep a menu the same for years. We do specials constantly, almost every single week, for day and night. And yeah, it's like I said, they're both great venues in their own right.
You're quite well travelled. How do you see Australia's cafe culture compared to that around the world?
The best in the world, by far. Well, it's just I think we're quite active. We're early risers. We're very get up and go. Like a lot of us, young people overseas in Europe, it is more common now, but it's not very common to be able to have a business at, in your early 20s, and people are up, they're active, they want to do their meetings. I think the brunch culture is big in Australia compared to anywhere else. Brunch, you go to France and for breakfast, it was just a coffee, a croissant and a cigarette. Like that's brekkie over there. It wasn't, unless you're doing a champagne breakfast on the weekends in a hotel in Paris or, a nice setting. It's not a common thing. And I think it's beautiful in Australia that we get to do that, going on for the weekend and having a few Bloody Marys or mimosas and margaritas, for your brunch with some mates is like, that's so great to be able to do that.
As an operator with two successful cafes, what makes a great cafe, and what does it take to make it successful?
Oh, passion. Like, especially now, the industry has been flipped upside down with everything that's happened with COVID and staff shortages and stock going up. If you're not resilient and you don't have the passion for it, you're not going to succeed, because it's going to be too hard. And in those tough times, you need to think, why am I doing this? I'm going to push through. Because like with anything, if you don't love it, you're not going to strive as much. It's a baby for me. Like for me, it's a baby that I need to nurture and it needs to grow. And one day, it'll take care of me, but I need to grow it and I need to love it. And even through tough times, you just need to nurture it.
Well, you've built something quite special. What do you love about what you do?
I go to work, I go to work now and I just love it. Being an owner is definitely it's a different beast. There's times where it's amazing, there's times where it's tough, but to be able to set your own time frame around your life and what you do with work is great. I wouldn't change it now. I wouldn't be able to go back. I love what I do.
Well, Robert, it's an absolute honour to have you on the Crackling today to hear just a bit of your story. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.